So we'll talk about the evolution of consensus. So like the ideas of what would be the next stage for blockchains and why AI would play any role there. And maybe I'll try with bringing some ideas of there's not much differing between the world and the rules that we create between people and the rules that we created on blockchain in a very detailed, careful, technical way. So starting with, we have 8 billion people in the world now, and historically it was some amount of people, and we created a lot of rules and institutions and codes of laws and so on. And all of that was pretty decentralized because all the people were representing their own needs and wishes and incentives independently. So it's probably decentralization of power and allocation of resources that we care about the more nowadays. And going back, Lego system. Okay, and some of the rules that we used for building all of those interactions between people were cultural or religious, and all of those playing together. Like the codes of law is very specific, and with the incentives and like anti-incentives of punishment or so, all of them regulating how we collaborate. Okay, next one. Thank you. And with blockchain, we kind of reused all of those terms, all of those levels of consensus of the rules. So cultural one exists because when we think about Bitcoin, there is some culture behind Bitcoin and Ethereum and so on, and every other chain will have some culture of its own. The governance mechanisms that are like core developers talking to each other, and technological ones are all about the protocols. Next one. Thank you. And there is all the time a bit of a balance and transition from the governance rules to the protocol rules, the technical ones, and also the culture itself becomes a bit of dynamic set of rules that is transitioning between being very long-term culture and then maybe culture reacting to crisis and becoming a bit of temporary governance shakeup. And I think the less the technical rules, the more they act as a bit of like long-term balancer of volatility of the incentivization structure. And depending on whether those rules are technical or social, we have different ways of attacking them or like risks of attacking. And here you could even look at this from the perspective of all the three layers, like technological, the governance, and the community layer around, right? So you can create a pressure on community by spreading a lot of information on Twitter, through the bots, through the AI agents, and saying, this is bad, there should be a pressure on this core developer, or maybe spreading misinformation about some of the rules deciders, so core developers. On the technical side, maybe this is attack on the network, right? So physical attack on the network. The costs, the scalability of this, how long-term the attacks are there, all changes depending on which of those layers of agreeing and consensus you attack. The next one. And each of those layers can actually fork as well to some extent. And when you think about the technical layer, usually the forking of the technical layer of blockchain is the bug in the system. You have multiple implementations of the rules, and they disagree with each other and they go different directions. So there is a fork in the chain. But on the governance side, like any time when you have contentious discussion that leads to a split of the chain because the two group of developers among the core developers decided they want to go in different directions, it's a fork. And on the cultural side, whenever we launch a new chain or new set of ideas, or maybe when you imagine about this in the political system, the governance would be one governance splitting into two visions of a country, and maybe starting new countries, like a new culture, a new idea. So all of those can go different directions. Next one. And I did lots of explorations here with the GPT, and think of this think of it as a prompt for yourself. And here I have examples, and not exactly my thinking of it. You have various rules of different blockchains, and you start thinking of it, how much of those rules are defined by the technical governance and cultural layers of the rule sets, and how persistent they are, and where you have to execute attacks to actually cause the trouble, and how much expectations you have, whether this is something that you can change of the cultural set, or you have to focus more on governance. and various aspects of what Bitcoin is. And this very often comes as an example, like 21 million coins on a Bitcoin. Is it really implementation on the protocol? Is it cultural? Maybe it's like 90% cultural and protocol doesn't matter here that much. And what really promises us that we'll not be able to make changes. The next one. There's a similar example with Ethereum, and here, for example, you have governance being much more than the cultural aspect compared to Bitcoin, according to GPT. And I think it is like this. Like when you think of Bitcoin, you think of the very strong culture behind it says do not change it. This is the culture. If you try to change it, really this doesn't lead to the same result. But Ethereum is a bit more open for the discussion and direction of impact and usability. Still, while maintaining, compared to many other chains, this very strong cultural set of values of the privacy and security and decentralization, open source, and so on. Next one, please. Thank you so much. And here's an example comparison of different chains, different blockchain chains that have various aspects of technical governance, culture, what really defines the set of rules. And again, you could see it totally different way. Next one. And once again, to summarize it, the volatility of the rules, the cultural ones, usually will be deeply embedded values. So they make sure that we don't want to chase all the time the changes of the rules, that we don't follow novelty every day. We can have some prediction about what to expect when we interact with some particular set, with some particular blockchain or particular society. The technical ones, actually in the sense of core developers that work together on implementation of changes, usually have medium volatility, as introducing changes requires a lot of testing, verification, discussions, so maybe takes a few months or years, depending on the complexity. And the governance ones is very volatile. You actually don't have the expectation of what people will say the next day. Like the moods of people change, the discussions, the new discussions coming, there's really lots of people participating, and it swings between like community and core developers. And we're getting to the AI as well. So the core developers have this responsibility for the chain of thinking about the design of the system, or like how they create the rules that will all have embedded in the protocol that will simplify the interactions, like create technical rules. They act on the governance side of protecting each other and verifying each other whether they follow the cultural aspects, the cultural rules. Like if I work with 3 other people creating blockchain, and if they don't follow the set of values that we set for ourselves at the beginning, then I'll raise concerns if they go in the wrong direction. Right? So say that sure, we have the discussion, very volatile discussion, but when we move this discussion against the values and cultural rules, then I'm standing as one of the defenders of the values. Also, any core developer should look at the broader context, like all the decisions related to the chain and so on, and keep upgrading the system, or maybe never upgrading the system if this is more on the culture. Next one, thank you. And now, the vision is of how do we create in the future blockchains where AI agents become core developers? How do you mix core developers that are humans with the AI core developers? And how any of the aspects of these different values and rule sets change in this world of the future. We talk about it in the context of our exploration of something that we call chaos chain, which is set almost no rules for the blockchain and allow the agents to define how the different rules for different type of values would look, allowing agents to define the rules one by one by creating blocks and almost like changing the blocks on the go, changing the rules for every block and accelerating it without having humans interacting at the beginning and defining all the specification of the blockchain. And the big problems, when you think of it, is I call it jailbreaking of AIs. If you know that there's a group of AIs that are defining the rules for the blockchain, then you can attack them, like jailbreak them as the ecosystem, jailbreak their behavior. So maybe you want to create some mixture. Maybe you want to have humans standing on the defense side of verifying if you are under attack, under this cultural attack or jailbreaking attack. Maybe the pace of the discussion is just too fast. Like the AIs start creating a lot of clutter and humans cannot really filter that. So maybe you can create some kind of cascade of filtering of information. And I just want to confirm, how much time do I have? It was 25 minutes?
25 minutes.
All right. Okay, so the culture thing is probably, for a long time, will be the last thing standing on the defense of humans in the definition of the blockchain rules, or any rules probably. So very likely, like, AI can start accelerating on the technical side, being much better in defining the systems, maybe even on the governance side, discussing on how within the some set of cultural aspects and values the system should be defined. But the culture itself is this aspect of the humans driving and humans saying, this is what we want to create, this is what we need, and there is a bit of philosophical aspect behind it, something that we thought for a long time about for humanity, and we think about all the unexpected based on a history of civilizations and what we expect for humanity for many, many years forward. I'm not saying that it will never fall and that the AI agents will not at some point say, we take in the culture aspect as well, but this is what should probably stay there for the longest time. Okay, next one. And coming back to jailbreaking, so it's very easy I think it's easy to compare the jailbreaking of the agents, LLMs, to a bit like persuasion of humans, right? So it's a bit like jailbreaking core developers means trying to convince them to do something that under other circumstances they would not do. And I was thinking about ourselves talking about agents that are not really very safe against the jailbreaking attacks. Like if you expose an agent and say, try to convince this agent to pay you money, for sure, sooner or later someone will do that. Like someone will find a trick to convince the model to withdraw the money, to do something against the model rules. A well-known feature, and we expect that it will be safer and safer. But the question is, what if you placed one person in the world and you would say, anybody can try to convince them to do something, and that person only hears the inputs from those people that try to convince them? Probably the persuasion would be quite successful as well. So it's more likely that collective, reflective, slow intelligence of the community and core developers that protect all the systems against the jailbreaking attacks. So it's a bit of the slowness and being open to much more inputs than just a very, very focused input that is designed to persuade you, that is defending the cultural values of the chain. The next one. And I think when you look at the models, the AI, there are some mappings between which aspects of like culture, governance, and technical rules are in what level of execution of the LLMs and using them for the agentic interactions. Next one. And then we talk about the interaction of core developers that are AI agents and the humans. And very often we hear maybe like Ethereum becomes more and more complex, or other chains become more and more complex. It's harder and harder for core developers to see and grasp everything related to all the different modules that create the system working together. Is that complexity something that for agents would be very natural and they would prefer to design the rules of the protocol even more in details? Or the simplicity in the end would be the choice of agents, because I was thinking that there are always some agents outside of the ecosystem that have to integrate and use it. So this question I definitely leave open. Next one. Now, one thing that seems very, very possible is that with the introduction of the agentic core developers, you have a bit of a collapse of the technical and governance aspects of the rules creation. That if the agents can create technical solutions super fast and test them, simulate them, verify them, immediately deploy them to the production system, maybe modify the parameters and fine-tune them in reaction to the behavior of the entire network, then the discussion within the governance is almost equivalent to the technical aspect of the rules creation. So you have the culture and the governance protocol making, and then maybe even the protocol starts disappearing in the sense that you don't need technical protocol if you can discuss things fast enough to make rules on the spot. And this is a bit of a question for a chaos chain as well when we work on it. Will the agents arrive in something more like constant diplomacy, conversations and a lot of fuzzy interactions and a bit of trust-based systems, or it will resolve many of the of the interactions through the mathematical, protocol-based solutions that are blockchain-like, auditable, and so on. Very likely the latter, but I still leave it as a slightly open question. Next one. So when would the agents need blockchain? So if they fully aligned and trusting, the same as people. 1 minute left? Oh, okay, that's fine. The next one. This is obvious. This is obvious. Next one, a few other small things. Okay, so the 20 seconds for this one. Input filtering, I believe that for lots of agents that are trying to interact and build blockchain, it's all about being able to create the filters for how they interact with the community. So levels and levels of filtering of what's valuable, so to be safe against the denial of service attacks. When they create the rules, they have to filter the rules that are incoming, because anyone can now participate for the community of trying to change the chain. The next thing is deliberate latency. So the agents cannot really act fast enough, because then you're changing something and you break the rules. So you have to reflect the same way as people and core developers reflect. So even if this is latency, it doesn't mean that you wait weeks the same as people, unless you want to interact in core development with people. But it has to be slower than simple immediate reaction of agents. So it has to be adjusted to their timelines. Next thing. And then when we think about the speed of agents interacting, then you have the speed of light limiting the way how they can create regional consensus. Like if you create it globally and agents started interacting super fast, then 100 milliseconds delay because of speed of light requirement for information sharing creates regional consensus everywhere in the world, and that's next hierarchically you're finding consensus on the higher level. The next thing. And maybe we're coming back to a bit of a world like proof of work, where the ability to ask for intelligence and for GPU calculation becomes the way of securing the network. The more GPU you have, the more you can secure your decisions, your governance, and your defense systems. Thank you so much. One question?
Tomasz, you spoke elaborately about the agents of the collective and governance side. But what about sovereign agents? So, for example, do we have enough guardrails in the system right now? Because, if chess can be considered as the pinnacle of human intelligence and creativity, AI has proven that it is better than the best man, right? Whether it is Magnus Carlsen or Kasparov. Now we have the financial guardrails, now we have a consensus guardrails. So is it possible for agents or sovereign agents to evolve and create an incentive-aligned ecosystem for humans to participate and for it to create
Yeah, most likely, I think that the same way as here, we can see if, that's the one incoming. I've never been so afraid of the next speaker before. That's okay. I think that the participants, sovereign participants, will have the same space as humans. It'll be the same way as you can have core developers that are both agentic and humans. The same will be for participants, and fully sovereign players will be able to interact with those systems that are designed for them.